The scent on the wind wasn't right. It wasn't wood smoke from a cooking fire. It wasn't the smell of dry grass. It was the smell of trouble. Running Wolf reined in his horse, the animal stamping nervously beneath him. The Texas sun in 1873 was a hammer, beating down on the endless prairie. Tensions with the settlers were a string pulled so tight it was ready to snap. He'd been sent to scout the edge of their territory, just a routine patrol, but there was nothing routine about this. A thin, dark finger of smoke clawed at the sky, rising from a grove of cottonwoods down by the creek. Strangers. He didn't need to say the word aloud. The feeling was cold in his gut. He nudged his horse forward, not toward the smoke, but alongside it, using the tall grass as cover. Then he heard it. A cry. A woman's voice, sharp with fear. He slid from his horse, tethering it to a scrub oak, his movements as silent as a shadow. The grass whispered against his leather leggings as he crept closer. He reached the edge of a small clearing and peered through the reeds. What he saw made the air freeze in his lungs. A small cabin, its door kicked in and hanging by a single hinge. And outside, a woman with hair the color of a sunset knelt in the dirt. Her arms were wrapped around a small boy, a human shield against the three men circling her. They moved like coyotes, slow and confident, savoring the fear. "Please," the woman begged, her voice a raw whisper. "Take what you want. Just leave us be." The biggest one, a man with a tangled beard and a filthy hat, let out a laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Oh, we'll take what we want, Mrs. Sullivan. And what we want is this land." He kicked a clump of dirt at her. "Your husband made a big mistake settling on Jackson's property." Her chin came up. "My husband will be back any minute." A lie. Running Wolf could see it in the desperate set of her jaw. But he also saw something else. A fire. A will to fight that hadn't been extinguished. Not yet. His eyes drifted to the child. The boy was maybe 5 years old, but his features were unexpected. His hair was black and straight. His skin was darker than his mother's. His eyes, even wide with terror, held a shape that Running Wolf knew better than his own reflection. Another of the men spat on the ground. "That little half-breed ain't gonna save you. Jackson wants this land cleared by sundown." Running Wolf's hand went to the knife at his belt. His people had no love for settlers. But these men were different. Vultures. They respected no law, no boundary. They were a poison on the land. The leader grabbed the woman's arm, hauling her to her feet. "Time's up, Mrs. Sullivan. We'll give you a nice long walk to the nearest town, after we burn this place to the ground." The boy started to cry, a thin, helpless sound. "Mama!" And in that moment, something inside Running Wolf broke. Maybe it was the boy, caught between two worlds. Maybe it was the woman's impossible courage. He didn't know. He didn't care. He stepped out of the tall grass and into the clearing. The world stopped. The three men froze, their smirks vanishing. Their hands flew to their pistols. "Comanche," one of them hissed. Running Wolf let the silence stretch, his gaze hard as flint. He let them see the war paint on his face. He let them see the quiet certainty in his eyes. Then he spoke, his English accented but clear as a bell. "This woman and child are under my protection." He pointed a single finger back the way they came. "Leave. Now." The leader's laugh was brittle, a dry leaf skittering in the wind. "Look here, savage. This ain't your fight. This is white folks' business." "No," Running Wolf said, his voice dropping low, dangerous. "This is Comanche land. You are the trespassers, and you have threatened a child." He took one step forward. "That makes it my fight." The standoff didn't last long. It ended with a flash of gunpowder. The shot was deafening in the small clearing, but Running Wolf wasn't there. He moved like his name, a blur of speed and instinct, the bullet searing the air where he'd been a heartbeat before. He closed the distance in 3 long strides, his knife already in his hand. It was a whirlwind of brutal motion. The other 2 men fumbled for their guns, their eyes wide with shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. The woman, Sarah, didn't hesitate. In that single moment of chaos, she grabbed her son, Benjamin, and shoved him behind a wooden water trough. Her hand dove into a pocket in her skirt and came out with a small Derringer pistol. The frontier had taught her that courage wasn't enough. You needed a backup plan. The fight was over almost before it began. It was short, bloody, and decisive. When the dust settled, two of the men were on the ground, groaning and clutching their wounds. The leader, the one with the beard, had scrambled onto his horse and fled, a coward's retreat into the endless prairie. Running Wolf stood over the fallen men, his breathing even, his knife dripping red in the afternoon sun. Then he turned. The woman was still aiming her tiny pistol at him. Her hands trembled, but her aim was steady. She held her ground, a lioness protecting her cub. He slowly, deliberately, wiped his blade on the grass and sheathed it. He raised his empty hands, palms forward. "I will not harm you," he said, his voice calm. "But those men were bad. Their leader will return. With more." She lowered the gun, just an inch. Her eyes were full of 1,000 questions. "Why? Why did you help us?" His gaze shifted from her to the boy, who was now peeking around her skirt. The child wasn't crying anymore. His eyes were wide with a strange kind of awe. "The boy," Running Wolf said simply. He looked back at Sarah. "He has the blood of the people." The woman's face was a storm of emotions. Shock, fear, defensiveness. And then, finally, a weary resignation, as if a secret she'd carried for years had finally broken free. "His father. He was killed," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "3 months ago. Cattle traders." Running Wolf nodded slowly. This was a story he had heard before. "Your husband?" "Yes," she said. "Thomas Sullivan." Her voice cracked and she looked away. "He wasn't Benjamin's real father, but he loved him. He took us in when no one else would." She took a shaky breath. "I was widowed before. Thomas, he gave us a new life." Running Wolf looked at the boy again, really looked this time. The features were there, the echo of a people he knew. But there was something else in the boy's gaze, a flicker of a memory he couldn't quite catch. "You are not safe here," he said, his voice firm. "The one who ran, he will bring Jackson's men. They will not be so few. You and the boy must come with me, to my camp. You will be safe there." Pure terror flashed across her face. "To a Comanche camp? They'll kill us." "No," he said, and for the first time his voice was gentle. "Our chief, Gray Eagle, is a wise man. He understands honor. Among my people, those who protect children are respected." He paused, choosing his next words with care. "What is your name?" "Sarah," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Sarah Sullivan. And this is Benjamin." The sun was bleeding across the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple. Sarah looked at the smoking ruin of her life, at the threat racing back toward them on the prairie, and then at the warrior standing before her. She had no other choice. She gathered the few things she could carry in a small bundle. Running Wolf helped her and Benjamin onto his horse, swinging up behind them. As they rode away from the burned-out cabin, the small boy, Benjamin, reached out a tiny hand and rested it on Running Wolf's leather tunic. It wasn't a gesture of fear. It was a gesture of trust. And in that moment, Running Wolf knew this was more than just a rescue. His path had changed. Their paths had changed. And the prairie held its breath, waiting to see where it would lead. The Comanche camp was a living thing, a sprawling collection of teepees arranged in a great semicircle, all facing the dawn. As Running Wolf rode in with Sarah and Benjamin, a ripple of silence spread through the camp. Warriors stopped their work. Women paused, their hands still. Children froze in their games, their mouths open in silent O's as they stared at the white woman and the strange child. Sarah held Benjamin so tightly he could barely breathe. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. Every horror story she had ever heard about Comanche raids screamed in her mind. The only thing keeping her from panicking was the solid, steady presence of the warrior behind her. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her back. "The chief's teepee is ahead." Before they could reach it, an old woman blocked their path. Her face was a beautiful map of wrinkles, each line telling a story of seasons past. She spoke to Running Wolf, her voice sharp, her hand gesturing at Sarah and Benjamin with clear disapproval. Running Wolf answered her calmly, his tone filled with a deep respect that softened his warrior's edge. They spoke back and forth in their own tongue, a river of words Sarah couldn't understand. Finally, the old woman's stern expression seemed to melt, just a little. She stepped closer, her dark eyes, bright and intelligent, studying them with an unnerving intensity. "This is Singing Bird," Running Wolf explained. "My mother. She asks why I bring a white woman and her child into our camp." Sarah swallowed against a throat suddenly gone dry. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That cowardly men threatened you. That the boy has the blood of the people." Singing Bird reached out a weathered hand. To Sarah's astonishment, Benjamin, who had been hiding his face in her shoulder, stepped forward. He didn't seem afraid at all. The old woman gently touched his cheek, turning his face to the light. She murmured something soft, her voice like the rustle of leaves. Running Wolf nodded. "She says the boy has a strong spirit. A Comanche spirit. She can see it in his eyes." Before Sarah could process this, a powerful voice cut across the camp. A tall, dignified man strode toward them, flanked by two other warriors. He wore a headdress of eagle feathers that spoke of his authority, and his gray-streaked hair was tied in long, neat braids. He was a man who commanded respect without saying a word. "Chief Gray Eagle," Running Wolf said, bowing his head slightly. The chief's piercing gaze swept over them, lingering on the boy. He spoke to Running Wolf, his tone questioning but not unkind. Running Wolf explained, his hands moving to tell the story, gesturing to the mother and child. Sarah held her breath, feeling as if her entire future was being decided in a language she could not speak. After what felt like a lifetime, Chief Gray Eagle nodded. He looked directly at Sarah, and his voice, when he spoke in halting English, was deep and resonant. "Woman with brave heart," he said. "Welcome." Then his eyes found Benjamin. "Boy with Comanche spirit. Welcome." He paused, his gaze sweeping the camp. "You will stay. You are safe here. The danger will pass." A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled her knees washed over Sarah. "Thank you," she whispered, the words feeling small and inadequate. As night fell, they were given a place in Singing Bird's tipi. The old woman silently offered them buffalo robes and a meal of dried meat and corn cakes. There were no words between them, but there was an understanding, a kindness. Later, with Benjamin sleeping soundly beside her, Sarah sat near the entrance of the teepee, watching the fires dance. Running Wolf came and sat beside her. They sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, listening to the sounds of the camp. "Thank you," Sarah said finally, her voice soft. "If you hadn't found us." He nodded, his profile sharp against the firelight. "Those men have no honor." He paused. "They went back to your cabin. They found it empty. It made them angry. They burned what was left." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "How do you know?" "I sent 2 warriors to watch. They saw the fire against the night sky." Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back finally spilled over, silent tracks on her dusty cheeks. The little home she and Thomas had built, their hope for a new beginning, was now just ashes. Everything was gone. "Benjamin's father," Running Wolf said, his voice careful, pulling her from her grief. "He was Comanche?" Sarah tensed. She looked at her sleeping son, his face so peaceful. She had been running from this question, from this truth, for his entire life. But here, in this strange place that felt safer than anywhere she'd ever known, the lie died on her lips. She shook her head slowly. "No. His father was Kiowa." Running Wolf's expression didn't change, but she felt a subtle shift in the air between them. Kiowa and Comanche were allies, but they were not the same. "His name was Swift Arrow," she said, the name feeling foreign on her tongue after so many years of silence. She took a deep breath, the story pouring out of her like a flood. "I was taken in a raid, 6 years ago. My first husband was killed. She looked into the fire, seeing the past in the flames. Swift Arrow. He was different. He was kind. He protected me. Running Wolf listened, his stillness an invitation to continue. We came to care for each other, she admitted, her voice dropping. When Benjamin was born, Swift Arrow was so proud. He said our son was a sign of peace, a bridge between our peoples. Her voice broke. But then there was a fight with buffalo hunters. Swift Arrow. He was killed. How did you get free? Running Wolf asked quietly. The army negotiated a release of captives. I went back, with Benjamin. She hesitated, the shame still a fresh wound. It wasn't easy. A woman with a half-Indian child. People were cruel. Then I met Thomas. He was a good man. He didn't see Benjamin's blood. He just saw a son. We moved to the cabin to start over where no one knew our story. Running Wolf nodded, a deep understanding in his eyes. Benjamin. It is a strong name, for a boy who must walk in two worlds. Thomas chose it, she whispered. It means, son of my right hand. He loved him so much. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the edge of the camp. 2 warriors rode in at a gallop, shouting urgently. Warriors began to emerge from their teepees, their faces grim. Running Wolf was on his feet in an instant. Stay here, he commanded, and strode toward the gathering crowd. Sarah's heart began to pound again. She watched as Running Wolf spoke with the newcomers and Chief Gray Eagle. The men's expressions grew darker. Warriors began to check their weapons, to prepare their horses. A sense of dread, cold and sharp, settled over her. When Running Wolf returned, his face was a mask of stone. The man who fled. He went to the fort, to a man named Jackson. He knelt in front of her, his eyes locking with hers. They have told the army a lie. They say a Comanche war party raided your cabin, killed your husband, and stole you and your son. That's not true, Sarah cried. The army doesn't know that. They believe the lie, he said, his voice grim. A patrol is gathering. They plan to ride at dawn. They are coming to rescue you. The blood drained from Sarah's face. If the army found her here, living in a Comanche teepee, they would never believe the truth. They would see her as a captive, maybe one who had lost her mind. And if they found out about Swift Arrow, she would be an outcast from her own world forever. What will happen? She asked, her voice trembling. If they find me here, they will think you are a prisoner, he said flatly. They will take you away, and they will attack my people for breaking the treaty. But I can tell them I came willingly. He shook his head, a gesture of profound sadness. Men like Jackson are experts at twisting the truth. They will say we forced you to lie. Or worse. She knew he was right. The situation was impossible. They were trapped. What can we do? She whispered, her hope dwindling to a tiny ember. Running Wolf was silent for a long time, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and determined. There is a place, a sacred canyon, 3 days' ride from here. It is hidden, a place our people go when war is on the wind. He looked at her, his dark eyes intense. We will take you and the boy there. We will hide you until this storm of lies has passed. He looked back at the teepee, where Benjamin slept, oblivious. In the canyon, he said, your son will be safe. Sarah looked at her child, her fierce, protective love for him rising like a tide. Everything she had ever done was for him, to keep him safe from a world that would judge him for the blood in his veins. Now, once again, they were caught, belonging to neither world, hunted by both. When do we leave? She asked, her voice steady now, filled with a new resolve. Before the first light, he answered. My mother will come with us. Her knowledge of medicines may be needed. A few warriors will guard our path. As Sarah lay down on the buffalo robes that night, her mind was a whirlwind of fear. But beneath it all, a strange feeling began to take root. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, this disastrous journey was leading Benjamin not away from safety, but toward a part of himself he had never been allowed to know. In the darkness, she watched him sleep. The high cheekbones of his Kiowa father. The fair skin from her English ancestors. A child of two worlds. A bridge. "I will keep you safe," she whispered, smoothing the hair from his forehead. "I promise." The ride to the sacred canyon was a trial by fire. For 3 days, they pushed through a landscape designed to break a person's spirit. They avoided the open plains, sticking to rocky gullies and treacherous game trails where an army patrol would never look. Benjamin was a revelation. He rode with Running Wolf, his small body pressed against the warrior's back, not with fear, but with a wide-eyed excitement. For him, this was the greatest adventure of his life. Singing Bird, the old woman, was their silent guardian. She and Sarah couldn't speak the same language, but they communicated through gestures and shared glances. The old woman showed Sarah how to treat saddle sores with crushed leaves and how to brew a bitter, vitamin-rich tea from pine needles. At night, around a tiny, smokeless fire, she would tell stories in the Comanche tongue. Her hands became birds, warriors, and spirits, painting pictures in the air that Benjamin watched, utterly captivated. "What is she saying?" Sarah asked Running Wolf on their second night out. He listened to his mother's rhythmic chanting for a moment. "She tells the story of the Star Woman, who fell from the sky and brought our people the first seeds." He looked over at Benjamin. "She says the boy reminds her of the star children in the old tales, the ones who can walk between the sky and the earth, the ones who build bridges." Sarah watched her son, seeing him through their eyes for the first time, not as a problem to be hidden, but as a miracle to be celebrated. His father died before he could teach him anything about his heritage. "Kiowa and Comanche ways are different, but their roots are the same," Running Wolf said. "A boy should know the stories from both sides of his blood." On the third day, the world changed. They entered a narrow crack in a towering wall of red rock. The path twisted and turned, at times so narrow their knees scraped against the stone. Then suddenly, it opened up. They had arrived. The sacred canyon was a slash of impossible green in the middle of a red desert. A clear stream snaked through a meadow, and tall cottonwood trees offered cool, deep shade. A handful of other teepees were already pitched by the water. "Others are here?" Sarah asked, surprised. Running Wolf nodded. "A few families. They came when the coughing sickness was in the main camp. It is a place of healing, a place of peace." As they made their camp, Sarah felt a profound shift in the air. The constant, gnawing tension that had been her companion for years began to unwind. Here, sheltered by the ancient canyon walls, the world and its dangers felt a million miles away. The days fell into a simple, peaceful rhythm. Singing Bird taught Sarah how to scrape and prepare hides, her gnarled hands guiding Sarah's clumsy ones with endless patience. Benjamin, meanwhile, had been adopted by the other children. He ran with them, a small wild thing, learning to fish with a simple line and hook, to identify the tracks of deer and rabbits in the soft earth by the stream. He was happy, truly, deeply happy, in a way Sarah had never seen. One evening, Running Wolf found her sitting on a ledge overlooking the valley. The setting sun had set the canyon walls ablaze. "He is happy here," Running Wolf stated. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I've never seen him like this. So free." In town, the other children had called him names. On their homestead, there had been no other children at all. He had always been alone. "Children see the truth," Running Wolf said, sitting beside her. "They are not born with boundaries. They must be taught to hate." She looked at him, at his strong, quiet profile against the brilliant sky. "What happens when we have to leave?" He was silent for a long time. "The chief will send word when it is safe, or—" He hesitated. "Some families choose to stay. They build a new life here, away from the conflict." Could she do that? Could she turn her back on her entire world? For Benjamin, could she? "I don't know if I could stay forever," she admitted. "But I am grateful for this place. For this time." Suddenly, they heard excited shouts from below. Benjamin was scrambling up the path toward them, his face flushed, his eyes bright. Mama! Running Wolf! Look! He held up a small, dark object. When he reached them, he opened his hand. Lying on his palm was a perfect arrowhead, chipped from a beautiful piece of red stone, the same color as the canyon walls. Running Wolf took it, his touch gentle, reverent. This is a great find, little one. This stone is sacred. It was made by the ancient ones who lived in this canyon long before my people came. Can I keep it? Benjamin asked, his voice full of hope. Running Wolf placed it back in the boy's hand. It found you. The old way says that when a sacred thing chooses a person, it brings them strong medicine. Benjamin's eyes went wide. Really? What kind of medicine? Running Wolf smiled, a rare, warm expression that transformed his face. He ruffled the boy's hair. The medicine of belonging, he said softly. This canyon knows you. It has welcomed you as one of its own. That night, as Benjamin slept with the arrowhead clutched in his fist, Sarah lay awake. Everything was changing. What she had always seen as Benjamin's curse, his mixed blood, was revealing itself to be his greatest gift. Swift Arrow had called him a bridge. She was finally beginning to understand what that meant. Her thoughts were shattered by urgent, low voices outside the teepee. Her heart leaped into her throat. She slipped out into the cool night air. A warrior stood with Running Wolf. His horse was behind him, its sides heaving, slick with sweat. He had ridden hard and fast. This was not good news. "What is it?" she asked, a cold dread seeping into her bones. Running Wolf turned to her, and his face was a grim shadow. "A rider from the main camp. Jackson's lies have grown. He told the army captain you were taken against your will. He now says Benjamin is a full-blooded white child, stolen in the raid. That's insane. Anyone can see." "The captain is new," Running Wolf cut her off. "He does not know our people. He does not know the land. He believes the easy story from the man with the powerful friends." The messenger spoke again, his voice sharp with urgency. Running Wolf's jaw tightened. "The army has offered a trade. If we return you and the boy, they will not attack the main camp." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "But we're not captives. They can't—" "They will not believe us," Running Wolf said, his voice heavy. "Jackson wants you gone. If you tell the army you chose to be with us—" He didn't need to finish. She would be branded a traitor, an Indian lover, a woman who had betrayed her own kind. Her life, and Benjamin's, would be over. A soft voice cut through the tense silence. Singing Bird had emerged from her teepee. She began to speak to Running Wolf, her voice surprisingly strong, her hands gesturing toward the far end of the canyon. "What is she saying?" Sarah asked desperately. Running Wolf listened intently to his mother. "She says there is another way, an old path, a dangerous one. It leads out of the canyon and into the hills beyond. From there, it is possible to reach the trading post at Riverbend." He looked at Sarah. "A man lives there, McAllister. He is a fair man. He has helped our people before. The army listens to him. How far? 2 days, a hard ride, a new plan, a desperate gamble. If they could get to this McAllister, if he would listen, if he would speak for them." It was a fragile thread of hope, but it was all they had. Sarah looked back at the teepee, at her sleeping child. Her every instinct screamed at her to stay in this safe, hidden place. But they couldn't hide forever. The world would find them eventually. She met Running Wolf's gaze, her own resolve hardening into steel. "We leave at first light." He nodded, a look of profound respect in his eyes. "You have the heart of a Comanche woman, Sarah Sullivan." As they prepared to leave, Sarah knew it wasn't just courage driving her. It was the fierce, primal love of a mother. And out here, on the wild frontier, she was beginning to realize they were exactly the same thing. The ancient path was a nightmare etched in stone. It was a narrow ledge clinging to the side of the canyon, a place where one wrong step would send them plunging into the abyss below. Sarah held Benjamin in front of her, his small body a warm, precious weight against her own. Running Wolf led the way, his horse picking its way with an unnatural calm. Two young warriors followed behind, their eyes constantly scanning the rocks above. Singing Bird had refused to be left behind. She had argued with her son, her voice sharp and insistent, until he had finally, reluctantly, agreed. "My mother says she has had a vision," Running Wolf had translated, his face grim. "She says she must come." By noon, they had passed the worst of the ledges and descended into a small hidden valley, a green jewel tucked away in the mountains. A spring bubbled up from a crack in the rocks, creating a tiny, perfect oasis. "We rest here," Running Wolf announced. "The horses need water." As they drank from the cool spring, Benjamin explored, his earlier fear forgotten in the thrill of discovery. Singing Bird followed him, her watchful eyes missing nothing. She showed him which plants had edible roots, which berries were sweet, and which were poison. She taught him Comanche words, her old, cracked voice patient and kind. "Your mother is very fond of him," Sarah observed, watching them. A rare smile touched Running Wolf's lips. "She says he reminds her of someone." He hesitated, his gaze distant. "My younger brother. We lost him many winters ago. A fight with the Osage." Sarah's heart ached for him, for the story behind the warrior's stoic mask. "I'm so sorry." "It was his time," Running Wolf said, the words a familiar refrain, but his eyes held a deeper sorrow. "My mother believes that a spirit can return. Not the same person, but the same light." He nodded toward the boy. "My brother's name meant Little Hawk. He was curious, like Benjamin, and he was never afraid." Their moment of peace was shattered by the return of one of the scouts. He slid from his horse, his words coming in fast, urgent bursts. Sarah's stomach clenched. "What is it?" Running Wolf's face hardened into granite. "Riders. On our trail. 6 of them. Not soldiers." He looked at her, his eyes dark with a terrible certainty. "Jackson's men." He barked orders. In seconds they were packing their meager supplies, their brief rest over. "We cannot outrun them in the open," he told Sarah. "There is a forest on the far side of this valley. We must reach it before they see us." They rode like the wind, the horses straining, their hooves pounding a desperate rhythm against the dry earth. Benjamin clung to Sarah, his face buried in her side, his small hands clutching her shirt. He didn't understand why, but he could feel the fear, a living thing that rode with them. Just as the sun began to touch the horizon, they plunged into the welcome darkness of a pine forest. The trees closed in around them, their tall trunks a protective wall. "We camp here," Running Wolf said, his voice a low whisper. "No fire." The night was long and filled with shadows. The young warriors took turns on watch. Singing Bird made a poultice for the horse's tired legs. Sarah held Benjamin, her body aching, her mind racing. Every snap of a twig, every hoot of an owl, sounded like approaching danger. Dawn came, gray and silent. Running Wolf appeared out of the mist like a ghost. The tension in his body was a visible thing. "They are camped in the valley below," he said. "Their search pattern. They are moving toward the trading post. They know where we are going." "How?" Sarah whispered in horror. "A traitor in our camp. Or they simply guessed." He crouched beside her, his voice barely audible. "We must change our route. Higher into the mountains. It will be slower, more dangerous." "Will we make it in time?" His face was grim. "If the spirits of this mountain allow it." They had been on the trail for less than an hour when disaster struck. They were crossing a steep slope of loose rock when Singing Bird's horse lost its footing. The animal screamed as it went down, and the old woman was thrown to the ground. Running Wolf was at her side in an instant. He knelt, his hands gentle as he examined her leg. His face went tight. "It is broken," he said, the words like stones. "She cannot ride." Despair, cold and absolute, washed over Sarah. They were trapped. They couldn't leave her, but if they stayed, Jackson's men would find them. Singing Bird, her face pale with pain, began to speak to her son. She gestured fiercely at Sarah, at Benjamin, then at the path ahead. Her voice was weak, but her will was iron. "What is she saying?" Sarah asked, her own voice choked with tears. "She says we must go on," Running Wolf translated, his voice rough with emotion. "You, me, and the boy. The young warriors will stay with her. They will make a splint. They will find a safe place to hide her. We can't just leave her here." He met her gaze, and in his eyes she saw an agony that mirrored her own. "It is my mother's choice," he said. "She knows what must be done." After a farewell that tore Sarah's heart in two, they pushed on, just the three of them. The mountains became their enemy, the terrain growing steeper, more unforgiving. Dark clouds began to boil over the peaks ahead. "A storm is coming," Running Wolf said. "We need shelter." As the first cold drops of rain began to fall, they saw it. A tiny cabin, almost swallowed by the forest, its chimney a thin line of stone against the darkening sky. An old trapper's shelter, long abandoned. It was their only hope. They stumbled inside just as the heavens opened up. Rain hammered the roof, and thunder cracked like a whip, shaking the very foundations of the small building. Benjamin, utterly exhausted, fell asleep almost immediately on a bed of dry pine needles Running Wolf gathered from a corner. Sarah sank onto a crude wooden stool, the last of her strength draining away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking at Running Wolf. "I'm sorry for bringing all this trouble on you, on your people." He shook his head, his shadow large and protective in the dim light. "The trouble comes from men like Jackson, not from a mother protecting her child." They sat in silence, the storm raging outside, Benjamin's soft breathing a gentle rhythm in the small room. Sarah watched Running Wolf, the strong lines of his face, the quiet power he carried so effortlessly. "Why?" she asked suddenly, the question that had been haunting her since the beginning. "Why did you really help us? You could have just ridden away." He turned from the window, his gaze meeting hers across the small space. "At first," he said slowly, "it was the boy. His blood called to mine." He paused. "But then I saw you. I saw your heart. You have the strength of a Comanche woman. You fight for what is yours." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, a deep and unspoken understanding passed between them. A recognition that went beyond words, beyond cultures. A connection forged in fire and fear. The moment was shattered by a new sound. A sound that cut through the roar of the storm and froze the blood in their veins. Hoofbeats, coming closer. Running Wolf was at the window in a flash, a silent predator. He peered through a small gap in the rain-streaked glass. His body went rigid. "3 riders," he whispered, his voice deadly calm. "They are coming right for us." Sarah scooped the sleeping Benjamin into her arms, her heart a frantic bird beating against her ribs. "It is Jackson's men," Running Wolf said, his hand already on his knife. "Stay away from the window." He flattened himself against the wall beside the door, becoming one with the shadows. The riders drew closer, their voices muffled by the storm. They were almost at the door. Sarah held her breath, praying they would ride past. Then a voice called out, sharp and clear in English. "Hello, the cabin! Anyone in there seeking shelter?" Sarah and Running Wolf exchanged a look of disbelief. The voice wasn't threatening. It was normal, but it could be a trick. "Who asks?" Running Wolf called back, his voice low, his hand never leaving his knife. There was a pause, and then the voice replied, "Name's McAllister, from the trading post. Got caught in this godforsaken storm tracking a damn army patrol." Sarah gasped. McAllister, the man they were risking everything to find. He was here. But Running Wolf didn't move. He held up a hand, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. It was too perfect, too easy. It could be a trap. "Prove you are McAllister," Running Wolf called through the thick wooden door, his voice laced with distrust. There was a heavy sigh from outside, followed by the sound of a man dismounting. "Look, friend, I'm wet. I'm cold. And my horse is about to bolt for the next county. Gray Eagle once told me that the only thing more stubborn than a government mule is his warrior, Running Wolf. Does that sound like something a land grabber would know?" The mention of his chief gave Running Wolf pause. It was a detail few outsiders would possess. After a tense moment, he nodded grimly at Sarah and slowly, carefully, unbarred the door. The man who entered was broad-shouldered and weathered, with a thick gray beard and eyes that had seen more than their share of trouble. He was flanked by two younger men whose mixed heritage was plain to see. McAllister's gaze swept the room, taking in the Comanche warrior, the white woman, and the sleeping child in a single, shrewd glance. "Well now," he said, pulling off his dripping hat. "This is an interesting party to find in my old trapping line. I presume you're Mrs. Sullivan?" Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Yes. We were trying to reach you, Mr. McAllister. This is Running Wolf, and my son, Benjamin." A flicker of recognition crossed the trader's face. "Sullivan, the widow from Cottonwood Creek. Ma'am, the whole territory is up in arms. The army's been told the Comanche snatched you and the boy. They've got patrols combing every inch of this land." "It's a lie," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "A man named Jackson and his thugs. They tried to run us off our land. They would have killed us. Running Wolf saved our lives. We went with him because we had nowhere else to go." McAllister's shrewd eyes moved from her earnest face to Running Wolf's stoic one. "Jackson," he grumbled, his voice a low growl. "That figures. Man's got an appetite for land that would make a locust blush." He sat heavily on a bench. "You'd better tell me everything, start to finish. I've known Chief Gray Eagle for 20 years. If he gave you sanctuary, it was for a damn good reason." As the storm raged on, the story spilled out. Sarah spoke of the attack, of her husband Thomas's death, of Benjamin's Kiowa father. She pulled out the worn, folded paper she had guarded so carefully. The map Thomas had made, the one that proved Jackson's claims were fraudulent. Running Wolf spoke of Jackson's lies to the army, of the threat to his camp, of their desperate flight through the mountains. McAllister listened, his expression growing grimmer with every word. By the time the storm finally broke and the first light of dawn filtered through the grimy window, a plan had been forged. "Here's what we do," McAllister announced, his voice firm with authority. "I'm riding you to Fort Richardson myself. The new captain there, Wilson, he's green, but he's not a fool. Between your testimony, this map, and what I know about Jackson's other dirty dealings, we'll set this straight once and for all." "But what about Running Wolf?" Sarah asked, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. "He can't just ride into an army fort." "He'll ride in under my protection," McAllister declared. "The army has a standing agreement with the trading post. My word is my bond. They'll grant him safe passage." As they prepared to leave, Benjamin finally stirred. He woke up and stared, his eyes wide, at the strangers in the cabin. McAllister crouched down, his gruff demeanor softening. "Well now, young fella," he said with a smile. "You've had yourself one heck of an adventure, haven't you?" Benjamin nodded seriously. "We hid in a sacred canyon, and I found an arrowhead from the ancient ones. And Singing Bird taught me how to say water and friend." McAllister let out a hearty laugh. "Sounds to me like you've learned more in a week than most folks learn in a lifetime." He looked up at Sarah, a new respect in his eyes. Their journey to the fort was tense, but McAllister's presence acted as a shield. The soldiers in the patrol they encountered looked ready to open fire at the sight of Running Wolf, but they backed down when the trader rode forward and spoke with their sergeant. At the fort, they were led directly to the commander's office. Captain Wilson was a young man, his face betraying his unease at the strange situation. He listened with skepticism at first, his eyes darting from Sarah to the imposing Comanche warrior. But as Sarah spoke, her voice clear and strong, and as McAllister laid Thomas's map on the desk, the captain's expression began to change. "This is a grave accusation against Mr. Jackson," Wilson said when they had finished. "It's the God's honest truth, Captain," McAllister said. "Send a detail to the site of the Sullivan cabin. You'll find proof of a fight. Then send another to the land registry office with that map. You'll find proof of a crime." He leaned forward. "I also happen to have documents detailing 3 other families who were run off their land right before Jackson conveniently filed a claim on it." Captain Wilson stood, his decision made. "I will investigate this personally, immediately." He turned to Running Wolf, his posture straightening with a newfound respect. "Please extend my gratitude to Chief Gray Eagle. He protected an American citizen from harm. The United States Army is in his debt." Hours later, as they rode away from the fort, Sarah felt as if a physical weight had been lifted from her soul. The lies had been broken. The truth was out. McAllister had offered them a small, empty cabin near the trading post where they could stay until they got back on their feet. "What will you do now?" Running Wolf asked, his voice soft as they rode side by side. Benjamin was asleep in Sarah's arms, his small face peaceful at last. "Start over," she said, looking toward the horizon. "McAllister says there's good land near the post. It's closer to your people than our old cabin was." She looked at him, her unspoken question hanging in the air between them. He understood. "It is good land," he agreed. "A place where two rivers meet. A fitting place for a boy from two worlds. He could visit. He could learn both ways." "Would he be welcome?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Gray Eagle is a wise chief. He sees that our future depends on building bridges, not walls." Running Wolf's dark eyes met hers, and his next words were a solemn vow. "And I will always make sure he is welcome." They crested a small hill, and the trading post came into view below them, nestled in a valley where the forest met the prairie. A place of meeting, a place of trade, a place on the border between two worlds. Singing Bird called him a bridge, Sarah said softly, thinking of the old woman, safe now, and recovering. A true smile spread across Running Wolf's face. "My mother is wise. The old stories say that children like Benjamin carry a special medicine. They are the ones who can see with two sets of eyes, and understand with two hearts. They are the hope for the future." Benjamin stirred in her arms, blinking in the bright sunlight. "Are we home, Mama?" Sarah looked from the sleeping boy to the warrior beside her, and then to the small cabin in the distance that represented their new beginning. A new kind of home. Not a place to hide, but a place to stand, proudly, in the light. "Soon, my love," she whispered, her heart full. "Very soon. We'll be home." The journey wasn't over. Sarah knew that. Building a life between two worlds would be hard. There would be prejudice, fear, and hatred to overcome. But for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't afraid. She had a friend. She had a home. And her son, the boy who was once a secret, was now their greatest strength. A bridge not of wood or stone, but of blood and love and hope. A bridge to a better future. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the wild frontier.